Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host. Today's conversation, I think, is hugely important and one that we don't tend to have that often in our society, in our culture. And that is the fact that pretty much, all of us are going to die someday. And my hope is that through this conversation, we're looking at that from a place of empowerment. And we're going to have a lot of, I think, different angles of conversations around that basic point. But I've got an expert on living and dying wise with me here today. And we're going to have some fun, I think, fun perspectives and valuable perspectives to look at. So stick around for just a second. We'll be right back. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. Awesome. So Maria Verdicchio is our special guest today, who has over 35 years of experience in service facilitation and guiding that she has gained through diverse experiences working around the world. With her training as an End of Life Educator, nature and forest therapy guide, and ceremonialist, Maria can assist you to gain clarity about your priorities, empowering you to make informed decisions. Using end-of-life advanced care planning, education, and coaching tools, she offers a pragmatic and heart-centered approach to helping others face the reality of their mortality through group workshops and one-on-one sessions. Maria also supports people in facing transitions in their lives, whether it's a job loss, moving, retirement, menopause, pet loss, divorce, or death. Planning and guiding ceremonies to honor these important life events can be so powerful. Welcome to the show, Maria.
Thanks. Thanks, Molly. Where to start?
Yeah, well, first off, tell us a little bit about how you got into doing this kind of work.
Yeah, it was lifelong, really. I'm an end of life designer. I call myself. I'm also a nature and forest therapy guide, which I've been doing for a longer time. And, I first began guiding people. I'll sort of go back to that when in like 1986. I was really young and I was a horseback trail guide in the Rockies. And I just loved being able to first be immersed in nature. I liked taking people on a journey. I really loved exploring, and I loved having people be a part of that exploration. And, congruent to that also was we all experience death in various ways, whether it's friends or family members or pets, or, we all go through that throughout our lives. And during that time, I just kept going through these life events. And nobody talked about death. I kept going into nature to sort of explore. I love the feeling in nature, and being in nature was really good. It was just good for my mental health. For all the people I guided in nature on walking tours or on horseback tours, I could tell it was good for them too. And I started noticing in nature, death is everywhere. One of my favorite times of year is actually fall. And fall is when you see that happening all around us. You see the leaves on the ground. You see maybe even come across animals, that could be year round. But in fall, you really see this visibly, that things are dying in nature. And I don't know what happened. After so many friends and family members dying over the years, it just made me think, wow, we never talk about this. I see this all the time in nature. Seems to just happen naturally for people and animals and plants. And so why don't we talk about it? Why doesn't this come up in conversation, over dinner? Why do we go to funerals and memorials and we come together to celebrate or mourn somebody, a loss of someone, but we don't talk about it? It just sort of happens. We do what we do. We do what we know. And then we walk away and we carry on in our lives. And so we don't think about our own mortality, or we do, and we're fearful of that. So how do we overcome that? How do we accept it as a part of life? And I think during COVID for me, I had a few friends die actually during COVID, and not from COVID. I'm in my late 50s, so people get ill, things happen. And it just made me think, wow, you know, some people embrace it in a way and they celebrate it themselves before they die. Others don't, and they just quietly disappear. So I just wanted to explore that. And once I did, and I thought, wow, there's lots we can do for each other and to help us get to a point where we can really plan, make sure that we have our affairs in order, so to speak. Um, and then when the time comes, we won't burden our friends and family members with what we've left behind. Um, it'll just be an easier transition. And once we've planned around our end of life and what we want for our end of life, it really helps you to sort of step back and go, well, if that's what I want for my end of life, then I better start now, because we don't know when our end of life is. We don't know when that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's the short answer.
Yeah. I mean, what I love is this is looking at, the fact that you'll die someday through a greater lens than just, am I leaving enough money behind for my family? Like there's so many other angles to look at, preparing for that moment for your loved ones in greater ways. I was just talking to my mom about that yesterday, actually, of there are so many beautiful things she's bought and put in her home over the years of her lifetime that when she's gone, my brother and I have no idea what's valuable and what's not, because they all look like these beautiful antiques, but some of them are real and some of them are, just not knockoffs, but just beautiful things that she has around the house. And we're going to be completely clueless as to what's actually of worth and what's just a memory or a moment. And that information would be really great to have before she goes.
Yeah,
As one aspect. Yeah.
and regardless if it's a value, monetary value, or a value to you. And so this is what I've heard from a lot of people is maybe they want to give something because they know it's of value to that person. Like you, maybe there's something in her home that you just really love. Like, it doesn't matter why. Maybe it conjures up a memory of when you were a kid and it just makes you feel really good and it reminds you of your mom. Then that's valuable. And actually for you to let your mom know that that's what you would really like to have, after she's gone. So these conversations are really important to have. It's really about just starting a conversation that about death and dying. And maybe it's even starting a conversation with your family members saying, maybe it is at the dinner table. I'll say, hey, I really remember Granny because of the earrings that I have. And even I just, every time I put them on, I think about Granny. What about you? What's something that makes you remember her?
Mm-hmm.
And that starts the conversation. It makes it kind of easy to get into maybe the nitty gritty and the practical aspects of it.
Yeah.
Or saying, hey, I would love to have a party before I die, so I could be there. Of course, not all of us can do that, but if you can just plan for that, great. And if others know that you want to do that, it just gets them thinking too about their own death and what they might want to do.
Yeah, I love that. Two really good options of easy segues to get
Yeah.
into the conversation. And then you never know what it's easier to get to the more uncomfortable aspects of that topic if you have a good lead in, I think. That's
Yeah.
really good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are some of the other things? I know I just mentioned, what the stuff is or what the stuff's worth. And there's the aspect, of course, of how financially is your end of life going to impact the people in your lives. And there's also so many energetic aspects to it of conversations to have with your offspring, conversations to have with your parents, conversations to have with yourself. What are some of the things that are just really important to be thinking about that we tend to avoid because of this, fear of death or this stigma around it?
Wow. Well, the list is long. And of course, it depends what's important to you as well. So, there's the practical side of it where you really should look at, depending where you live, an advanced care directive. And that's the practical stuff that you fill in so that if something happens or when something happens, it's all written down and somebody else also has access to that documentation. Even your doctor can have a copy. And that can include something like, who's going to speak for you if something happens and you can't speak for yourself? So whether you're in a coma or you just can't make a decision for yourself, it will be up to the person who's been appointed by yourself. But if you don't appoint someone, it automatically goes to like your partner or your daughter or your son or whoever that is. So it's important that you have conversations first with the person you want to appoint. And maybe that isn't your partner, because maybe your partner will just be too distraught to be able to, handle that decision making. But maybe you decide, oh, I'm going to talk to my best friend and see if they're willing to do this for me if something happens. And you'll have documented everything. It's just that they have to be the one to say yes, to the doctors. So that's some decision making that's really important to do practically. And then the other things are sort of like you're alluding to and I was alluding to, you can call it a heart will or a living will. And it's just a letter maybe that you write out and you say, for my niece, I really would love it if she had that book that I know that she would really love. Or for my daughter, I know that she wants to have, or I would like for her to have, such and such, that pair of earrings or that vase, because it was grandmother's and it has this history, this value. Yeah, so all these little things. Also passwords. Don't forget passwords, our digital life. That's a huge one. There's a lot of paperwork after somebody dies. So if you can do all this kind of pre-work for whoever's going to be taking care of all that other stuff, that's really important. So just printing out all your passwords, or if you use LastPass or another vault of some sort, if you don't, start now, put them all in and have that one password, but you have to write that down, and make sure that somebody knows where you're keeping these documents. Here in Canada, there's something called a green sleeve. I think there is in the States as well. And you put it on your fridge and it has important documents. I mean, one of the most important documents is who to call in case of emergency. Paramedics know to look at your fridge. They know to look at ICE in case of emergency and a phone number and a name. That's, one thing you can do that could really help. But also this green sleeve allows you to put your documents in it, stick it on your fridge. It's there and paramedics know and others know, people know. So that's really important. Things like who's going to look after your cat? What happens if suddenly you trip and fall and that's it? You hit your head. You're found in your kitchen on your floor and your cat's there, or your other animals. Who do you want to look after your pets? But of course, you have to talk to people to make sure that they want to take care of them as well. So it's not just about documenting, it's also the conversation part with your friends and family members to make sure that they're all a part of it.
Yeah. There's something, I forget if it's a Swedish death gift or some other do you know what I'm talking about?
The death cleaning, Swedish death cleaning.
Yeah.
And it's funny because as I get older, I think about that, sort of, paring things down. And I do find that I know some people who are older in their 80s and they do that. They've already done that, or they're in the process. I know somebody who's in the process of that.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is? I could describe it, but I feel like you know more.
Yeah, I'm just talking about making sure that you've got everything. You're not leaving somebody a mess to look after. So some people are a bit hoarders, say, and you want to make sure that you take care of all that stuff, meaning get rid of it or allocate it or organize it, and hopefully get rid of things as you get older, just so that nobody has to go through that after you're gone. And as I said, it can be any time. It's not just when you're older. I keep saying that. And you could die anytime.
Exactly. And yeah, it's hard enough to be the person left behind and grieving, to also then have to weed through mountains of things that you've acquired over your lifetime that you just never wanted to go through. It's like such a gift to go through some of that. And yeah, my mom has been going through certain things just by categories, like how many vases she has. And it's like, okay, well, how many of these vases do I actually need?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like, the 12 boxes of tax receipts or
Mm.
whatever. It's like, well, you only really need to keep the last 5 years. So like handle the other boxes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
All the things that just exist around you, just starting to look at them in a different way of like, even if she lives another 20 years, that's stuff that she doesn't need to have around anymore. And you never know. So it's worth going through it. And what a gift to your family to make less of their grieving process be about the junk that was in your life.
Yeah, because grief sort of becomes a part of your life. It doesn't really go away. It just changes and morphs and over time. And everybody grieves differently. And the statistics around what happens after somebody dies, what happens to the family members, it's really interesting. Trying to remember, I should bring it up. It's a really good report that talks about, for example, with work, how it affects your work and how many employees miss a lot of work over time. It's not just in the immediate time after death, but it's actually can go on. Like I said, it just depends what happens with your grief. I know somebody who's taken a few months off work and is gradually going back, but actually I think it's too soon for them to go back to work, and then that's the other side of it, is that employers haven't actually allocated a policy for bereavement leave. I know here it's 3 days and it's unpaid bereavement leave.
Yeah.
um, you know
Like just enough time to go to a funeral and get back. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Let alone everything else that you may have to do around that, plus the emotional side of it for you. Yeah, so, some employers are looking at that to extend it or figure it out. Others are starting to add it to their employee benefits, bereavement leave. Yeah, that's a whole other side of it,
And
right?
so you in your work, I mean, you do a lot of things. We call us DLOSs, does lots of stuff. You have a lot of different areas that you support people in, but some of those are first off helping people plan for that end of life and
Yeah.
holding them accountable or supporting them through the
Mm.
process of looking at all those angles or having those conversations or starting to, you know, set up the documentation and create the things to support them. And then do you also, it sounds like if you're doing the nature and forest therapy, you're also helping people through the grieving process once they've lost someone. And what are some of those angles of who's a good fit? Because I know everyone out there probably listening has lost someone at some point or is thankful for this episode, considering they might die someday and it's worth looking at before it happens. Who's the best fit to come and work with you and get your support?
Well, as a friend and colleague says, any mortal, right? But I tend to find the people who are drawn to my work, at least for the end of life work, are people around my age who maybe have parents in their 80s, and, they're going through it with their parents. Either one of them has died and they've been through that where they had to deal with some of the paperwork or the organizational aspects after the fact, or they just went through maybe a partner who died and they had to go through sort of a slow process with somebody dying from an illness. So those are the people that I tend to be drawn to me. But I've also worked with a young family actually in the States. They had a 3-year-old or have a 3-year-old, and they just wanted to get their things in order. They realized, well, we have a child. We did a will before our child was born, so now we have to revisit the will for sure. And then also there's all the other aspects that we want to look at. So we actually did 8 1-hour sessions, and that was really great, really great, really forward thinking of them.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see more people sort of in their 30s, who are working professionals. Maybe they're just starting a family. It's really important to consider all this side of things too.
Yeah. I remember bringing this conversation up to my brother
Yeah.
after he had his fourth kid and saying, you guys are going to live forever. I just know it. And you have 4 children now. So you need to make sure you have some of that paperwork figured out
Yeah.
for their sake so that they are covered in those ways. Yeah. So it's really, it doesn't have to be so stigmatized that, you know, we don't talk about death, it's taboo or whatever. It's an inevitability when you choose to come into a physical body, that's part of the game.
Yeah.
And that, you know, the society we live in right now, there is a lot of paperwork to get in order and things to be aware of and things to have a little bit of forethought with. And it's such a gift to do that due diligence now while you're in your right mind and you're still alive, for all the people who love and care for you to have an easier time once you're gone.
Yeah, it is. And it also, it just makes the whole transition, you know, for the people who are left behind emotionally, it actually really, really helps if they have that guidance from you
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, there's so many aspects to it.
Yeah.
Legacy is the other thing. It's, you know, what are you leaving behind? And some people think legacy has to do with money. You know, that can be part of it, but it's not all about just leaving money behind. It's about what are you leaving of yourself behind, or what do you want to leave of yourself behind, you know? One of the workshops I used to do was legacy love letters.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, it was really amazing. The first time I did it, I was like trying not to cry, you know, as I'm doing it. And it's all about creating letters for people in your life that you want to leave for after you die. So it's a chance to tell them what you feel about them. It's not, we always say, do the pre-work. If there's anything that you really want to get off your chest, do that, because that's not what the legacy love letter is. It's about just, pouring out what you think about that person. And what's really interesting is by the end of the workshop, a lot of people decided that they wanted to give it to those people now.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, why wait till after I die?
Yeah. No.
Because it can change relationships.
Yeah.
And it can mend ones and heal ones. It's really interesting.
Yeah. To think about things in a final way like that, it brings things into perspective of what's actually important to hold on to and what am I willing to let go of now, or do the work to move beyond now. I think just looking at your life through that lens of what conversations do I not want to leave unsaid before I'm gone is a really powerful self-growth tool too. Of like, what do I need to clean up? What do I want to get clear on? If I was going to send that person a letter from beyond the grave, what would I want to tell them and acknowledge in them? And yeah, am I saying that enough right now?
It can change your life, right now.
Yeah.
By doing that. So, there's so much when you do this kind of work that affects your life now.
Yeah.
And usually for the better.
Yeah. I wonder if it was because you and I spoke a couple weeks ago, but I'm just realizing how many conversations about this I've had in the last few weeks. I was hanging out with my best friend and went into her phone to add a note to my contact info with, the password, the things to delete on my phone, or the things to go and like handle for me, even if my family is still alive, that I would want her to be the one managing or doing in my digital world. Yeah.
And what did she say when you told her you were
She was
doing
like,
that?
of course, I got you. Type it right here.
Yeah.
Like, great.
That's
Thank you.
great.
Yeah. And she wants dibs on my dog, but that's
Yeah.
a given.
Write that down somewhere so
Yeah.
other people can see that.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a document on my computer that says in case of death. And so that was one of the things that I wrote. Here's how you log into my computer. Here's the document you're searching for. That has, my living will or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. And you know what? There's all sorts of online platforms now that can deal with all that, so you can just join the platform and go through the whole list so it can guide you that way as well.
Yeah.
So that's really handy.
Yeah. So what kinds of workshops or offerings do you have coming up, or what's the best way for people to get a hold of you or reach out if they're interested in getting your support with this stuff?
Well, I don't have any workshops scheduled for public. I have a couple of private group workshops coming up that are actually nature and forest therapy. So I'm taking, what I'm finding with that side of things is groups for wellness days are being attracted, like employees. So I'm taking a group of 10 people out, which will be really great in the probably cool, rainy, rainy November, beginning of November. I will be posting those some virtual forest bathing online, which I did a lot during COVID. So I will be posting that through Eventbrite and through my website. And people can contact me if they want to do some advanced care planning, some of their end of life work. I do one-on-one or with couples, even a family group, which I haven't done yet, but I think that would be really great to be able to have a family group together, and being as that support person during that conversation and getting that conversation going with a family group. So that I do mostly virtual work. So I can do that for anyone, anywhere.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
what's your website or email? We can.
Yeah. My website, the best website is liveanddiewise.com or hello@liveanddiewise.com.
Awesome. So if you're out there or you want to have that conversation with your parents or your siblings or someone and get support with, the following through the plan or the emotional support after that conversation happened, maybe. Whatever the case may be, go to liveanddiewise.com and we'll put that link in the show notes for you. And Maria, you've shared so much beauty and magic already. And I feel like I can just feel from your presence and the fact that you chose this as your work in this world that, yeah, you have a lot of beauty and magic to be sharing. And I'm grateful that you're sharing that with the world and holding sort of the torch of let's have this conversation. Let's change the way we do this in society and in our own lives. So I'm really grateful for that, for you beating the drum of that message. Any last words of wisdom you want to leave people with? Not because you're dying, but because the episode's over.
Yeah. Well, it's just really important to consider. So even if there's one little nugget that you've taken from this podcast, that just makes you think about it, that's great. I'm happy for that. Thanks, Molly. I'm really grateful that you asked me to do this.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. And thank you, everyone out there, for listening, for seeing, not just how do we make the most of our lives, but how do we look at the time that we have left and how can we leave the people we love as well off emotionally, physically, energetically as possible when we do go. So thanks for being a part of this conversation, all of you listeners, watchers. And whatever happens, keep asking big questions and taking bold action because you're here for a reason. Bye.